All right, welcome back to the Skillist podcast. I'm Brad Salon from Root School.
Matt Corradino from Caribbean Earth Skills.
And our guest.
And a guest! Oh my god!
Our first guest.
That's awesome.
Ruth Ann Colby Martin. Yeah.
Hey.
Hey.
Wow, so crazy.
Nice to be with you guys.
So crazy.
Did she teach at your standard?
She taught the fire making, the shelter building, the water lecture. I can't remember
brain
what.
tanning.
Yeah, definitely brain tanning.
Yeah.
Part of the plants lecture.
Yep.
Some other stuff. And now you're sitting in my napping pit.
Insane.
Yes. So crazy.
For me, that was 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's 20.
It was this
25 years ago.
It was this month.
25 years ago.
25 years ago. That's crazy.
Dang.
You were like a mythical creature at that point. It was just like, what is that thing?
Was it like Outside Magazine or Backpacker Magazine?
Outside.
And
Outside Magazine.
And the guy was gay, but he kept talking about how amazing. He called you the Valkyrie of survival or something like that.
She could turn a gay man straight or something like that.
Yeah, no, he literally said that. And all the other guy instructors were like, what's wrong with me? Homophobia out the window. This isn't fair.
Oh, it's great. You guys are great.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
man.
nice to be here. It's nice to be back in touch.
Yeah.
It's really great. It's really great.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool to, like, you know. Whew.
Long-term relationships matter.
Yeah.
They do, and skill-wise, you know, you're like, you put the person on the pedestal, and then...
You surpass them.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Surpass
it's
your
true.
teacher.
It's true.
Well,
Then the skill goes on the pedestal, and you're, oh, wait, what about that person? They were pretty cool.
right.
And a lot of times...
Well, then you can be friends with them.
If they're cool.
If they're cool. Yeah, right. But no, and then you went other directions, which is what we're pretty excited to talk to you about, is like, you have our perspective in terms of like really inhabiting the skills, and then you went different directions with the study of midwifery and the application of it that like is so related in this way I think a lot of people wouldn't get, but it's like the creation of more people. You couldn't think of a more important long-term survival skill. You know, like I can't, like basic medicine, and then like that as a part of medicine, watching my wife go through having 2 kids, and like, it's scary and dangerous and so raw, and like such a part of what it is to be a human surviving in the world that it's really cool to get to have a conversation with somebody who's, been in the trenches with it, and can relate to also like the survival aspect or the awareness aspects of it. So
Yeah, no, the pucker factor is real, for sure. So yeah, I, after a decade in the woods doing skills with men, which was hard.
Right.
It was hard. It was challenging. I was lonely for females, but I learned a lot, and it was good. And then it's funny that I went from all men to hanging out with all women, which is the midwifery field. But yeah, sometime when I was a caretaker in the Pines, somebody handed me the book Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin. You probably heard of it. And I read that, and I was like, this is what I'm doing next. So like at 23,
wow.
I just knew. And I put the book away because I'm like, but right now, this is what we're doing.
Right.
We're doing skills. I was doing a lot of mountaineering all over the world and marathoning. And I just knew someday that's what I was going to get into. So came time to have children. And I, spent 46 hours begging for death, trying to push out my first kid.
Oh, crap.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
It's so brutal.
That's crazy.
It completely changed me. Completely.
Man.
46 hours is so long.
It hurt.
Yeah.
But my midwife was with me the entire time. And every time my eyes were rolling back in my head and I was like, I'm dying. And I swear I could see the shadow of death in the corner at one point because I was delirious. I'd been awake 3 nights. And my midwife looked at me and was like, we can get in the car and you can push it out on the mountain road on the way to the hospital, or we can keep doing this. And just looking into her eyes and seeing how calm she was, I was like, all right, nothing's wrong. I'm being a pansy here.
Oh, the guys finally helped you with something right there. Yes.
So, her faith in me, and, if I had been a transfer, if I had been in the hospital to begin with, I would have been a surgical birth. It would have been a C-section, and it would have crushed my soul. I don't know if I ever would have recovered, because I never would have known what I could do.
And
Because
you probably
for me-
would have been in line for another C-section for the next
Absolutely.
one, because that's what they
Absolutely.
do. They cut the next time.
That's how it works. And, honestly, for all the beauty and amazing life and skills and relationships I built in the woods with the guys, part of me was like, well, who am I as a woman? And so giving birth was the way I was going to prove myself, which, funny, is why it took that long, because you can't give birth from that perspective.
You're saying that a dude can't give birth.
We're not going there.
No, a man could if they physically could, but a dude could not do that.
Okay,
Because I
gotcha.
see dude bro all over that statement right there. I'm gonna prove myself giving birth. It's
And
like
that's
you can't have
exactly
that, that
You can't
dude
give birth from that, push harder, be stronger, which is what I had learned running marathons, climbing mountains, doing skills. That's what I'd learned, and I tried to bring that to birth. It failed me. Birth is all about complete surrender, complete trust in your body, and complete surrender. So my second one was 6 hours, painless.
Wow.
My third one was 2.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So the other thing that I learned was that, see, this is the menopause brain. It's there. It's gone. We'll talk about that later. Anyway.
That's okay. Well, I'll hit you with a
Thank you.
question.
Hit me with a question.
So,
Oh, sorry. No.
go for it.
I came back. So the interesting thing for me, and the very important sort of recognition piece of that, was my husband, who's, a badass mountaineer, right? Tough guy, amazing husband and father. The next day, one of his closest friends was like, dude, what do you think? Aren't you glad you're a man? They were on the phone. And he's like, and I was, still like shuddering from my experience, laying on the couch with the baby, like, what the hell do I do with this thing?
Yeah.
And I listened to my husband respond by saying, there's a long pause. And then he said, I've spent my entire life climbing mountains all over the world, chasing experiences to prove myself, to see what I'm made of. And I've never found it. And I just watched my wife do it. And I'll never be able to do that or find that. And I was like, dude! I did it!
prove myself right now.
Because you're pushed to your limit. And we talk about it as the little death. That when a woman gives birth, it's like, in a lot of native cultures, they have the sweat lodge, right? And the men have to prove themselves. And women give birth to prove themselves. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes you die.
Right.
Like, the stakes are real. So that's we're getting to the long
shit.
answer of how tracker skills moved me into midwifery. So it's the little death. Part of you has to die. You have to surrender, and you have to let that part of you die to give birth. And then you're reborn as a mother every time.
Right.
There's a rebirth.
Well, I think there's definitely, obviously, from where we learned, there's a big part of that surrender part of it. And to me, as it applies to skills, the surrender part of it isn't about whether you're going to survive or not. It's about whether you're going to have an intact relationship with the earth. Because some people can go through a survival situation and be so traumatized that they never even want to be outside in nature again. So I think that surrender piece, as it applies to primitive skills, is more about surrendering the ego and surrendering the need to prove yourself in nature. And it's you can't really prove yourself in nature in a survival situation. You can just either live or die. Mm-hmm. There's nothing to prove to, and there's nothing to prove. So, and I think people maybe sometimes mistake that whole idea of surrender, if I don't surrender, then I'm going to die. No, it's more keeping that intact relationship, which opens up more possibilities, survival-wise. And I know for me, when I saw my wife giving birth, I don't think, especially in a home setting, you can't not be blown away by that. You can't, it's not possible not to be totally, first of all, just holy shit, I gotta go run. I gotta go work out. I'm gonna fucking toughen up here because I couldn't deal with that shit. But also just really, just moved emotionally moved. So it was a powerful experience for me to watch that happening, especially in that home setting where there's a feeling in that if you're in a hospital, it's like the doctors are just doing it, the nurses are just doing it, the machinery is just doing it, right? I think it's easy to make that mental leap of, oh well, you have to do that, you have to have them there, and it's like there's this mentality that they're the ones doing it, which is totally not the fucking case at all.
It's the person giving birth doing it.
But it's our perception.
Even you two watching your wives you're not just observers either. You're getting the oxytocin flow. You're participatory. You have stakes on the line. 2 people might die that matter most to you.
Right.
So you are involved in all the ways.
I was just opening coconuts.
That works.
Oh, the midwife was stoked. She was like, oh, yes, of course, I'll take that. These guys are great. I'll have another one, please.
That's awesome. After that experience, I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. So I started my midwifery training when Annie was just a couple months old. And, fast forward, I've been a midwife for 20 years. I have a small practice, ecstatic birth. When I was naming it, my husband was like, what about birth is war? What about you wish you would die, but you don't? I was like, no.
Birth is war. Yes.
I mean, that's why I said you've been in the trenches, and I was like, I don't really not mean that. Like, I kind of mean that. Like, from seeing it twice firsthand, I was, holy shit.
It's real.
Yeah.
And I was like, but no, ecstatic, because life or death, that edge, because you don't know, and you don't have control over which edge you're going to go off.
Right.
It's ecstatic.
Right.
Even if we died, it would have been an ecstatic experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway,
right.
The stakes are high, and as I've pondered, I've been practicing for 20 years, as I said, and I've been through a lot, and I've watched that edge. I've walked with people through that edge a lot, and what I've realized a lot of things, but as I've tried to track myself back and recognize, well, how did I get from tracker to midwifery? I mean, I told you my personal story, but the other piece that I think is really important that I want to articulate and share is that once I had those 10 years in the woods doing what we did together, I recognized just how interconnected, I mean, this is the obvious, we all know, but just to state it, how interconnected we all are with one another and with the earth and all the resources that the earth gives us. And then once I had that connection, I realized my responsibility to that relationship, that, the spirit that moves through all things, we're all connected, it matters. And doing the skills was one thing, which I was never, I love the skills, I love practicing the skills. It was never like my calling is to be an expert, skills person, more to share and to educate. But I realized that my way of saving the world, at 20, we wanted to save the world. I was like, Francis Weller is one of my favorite authors, and he speaks about grief and the 5 gates of grief. And the one gate of grief that really has deeply spoken to me is that we all expected when we were born to be born into a community where we were received and held without a shadow of a doubt, ever doubting that we belonged and that we mattered and that we had a job and a role to play, that we had a specific gift. We were here to learn what it was and to give it to the world. And that our community was there to help us discover and develop that gift. And so we walk around with that, along with all the other griefs, the grief of the destruction of the earth, the grief of our own pains that happen through life, physically, emotionally, losses. There's a lot of ways that we carry grief, but that grief is something people don't really speak of.
Well, I think they don't even understand it. Like, it's when you're born without that and you never experience the fullness of that, how can you really understand it without it? How many generations have been removed from that community circle, that closeness to the earth circle, where you don't even have, there's no ability to articulate it.
Hundreds of years, hundreds. So I'm like, that's what I want to give back to people. I want to it's like, well, I didn't get it, you didn't get it, we can all be bitter because we didn't get it, or we can start now with our generation. Like, okay, I didn't get it, but let me give it to my kids. Right? So let's start with birth. If we are born into that space with that loving family and midwife and whoever's there, where we, beyond a shadow of a doubt, are received with love and belonging, that we know how wanted we are, we know our place, we're grounded in the earth, we're grounded in spirit, we're brought in with the ceremony, then that's what I want to do. So that was sort of the track that I played from what we did in the woods together to practicing midwifery is, okay, let's bring in these babies in a way that their lives will be richer and more connected and have that sense of belonging. And then the parents or the mothers or the people giving birth, just like my experience, are reborn in a way that I know what I'm made of and I know I can raise this child, however hard it is. I just did that, right. Which was nothing compared. I was like, well, I ran marathons. I climbed Aconcagua. I can do this. It's a joke. Giving birth was really hard. And it taught me what I can do.
What would you, from my outside perspective, one of the things I witnessed with my wife was that, like, the birth was really, difficult, but it was like this acute thing that you recover from. Whereas, like, the identity shift of being a mother, that was, like, as hard. I can't say which was harder, but I'm wondering for you, like, which do you feel like was harder? Because the identity shift to a mother is, like, the identity shift to a father is real, but I feel like it takes longer.
Yeah, it's much more gradual.
Right, whereas, like, witnessing Sarah, it was like, okay, now this thing needs you all day, every day. You are its link to life in a way that, like, no one has ever needed you like that. And now, like, you have to put all of your wants and needs aside from, like,
and your
keeping
calories.
yourself alive. Right. To now, like, be a mom. And, like, as much as you try and help as a new father, you feel fucking useless.
You're so useless.
And you're just
for
like,
years.
Okay, I'll make sure you have food and water, and I'll, like, change diapers, and I'll be up when I can. But, like, mostly the kid wants you, the mom, and I'm just, like, here to support you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, to put more words with it, I feel like my job is to facilitate all of that as a midwife, starting with prenatal care. It doesn't happen at the birth, it starts the first meeting. And it goes through that year postpartum, right. Of, like, how can I facilitate this experience? So that's the secret, right? You think I'm just taking heart tones and catching? I'm actually there to hold that space and to facilitate that human transforming into something greater and better and important for the whole earth. And, becoming not just parents, but then grandparents. So what I'm facilitating is something that I'm hopeful to last decades. Does that make sense?
Yeah, generations.
Definitely. Generations.
Really?
That is my true work. That is what I'm doing, right? And I don't put that on paper and I don't tell that to my clients, but that is what my heart work is right. How do I facilitate this transformation in a way that helps all the members of the family that this person touches and the future generations. So for me, it's a great question. I'm just thinking about it. I wanted to have babies so bad for so long that I was 31 by the time I had my first. And I think at first I was 100% in, and my kid was hard. She didn't sleep for longer than 2 hours till she was 5. By that time I had a second one.
It's a very elongated scout class.
They both got up and down. There were some nights my husband would get up to go to work in the morning, and I literally hadn't been to sleep yet. I'd put one to bed, the other one would be crying. I'd put her to bed, the first one would be crying, I'd put her to bed. And I was just like, what the fuck? When does this end? So the transformation for me at first, I was all in. I was like, and I felt a euphoria that lasted for months. You know how we worked with Tom in the philosophy classes about the veils and moving through the veils and being in a place where you can, like, feel and see things that aren't physical? And he talked about, at some point, Tom said, you go to Delta when you give birth, right? And I did. I saw the shadow of death in the corner in my 45th hour. And that stayed for like 2 weeks. But I was in this place and space that I was aware tangibly, physically, of things other than physical. It was really amazing. And that slowly wore off, and I was really sad. I was like, oh, it's closing. The veils are closing. I was like, damn it. But I stayed in that euphoric state for months because I wanted to be that mother, and I wanted that child. And I felt for the first time, I would just hold that baby and be like, I'm never going to be alone again. I'm never, and I've realized since, my life's journey has been about finding a place of belonging. And that's my first book, is Wanting Only to Belong. And when I was born early, I was put in an incubator for days. So I feel like that was the start, is I've been looking for my mother my whole life, right? I've sort of been seeking that, being held and belonging. And so I felt that with my firstborn. So for really the first year, I just was euphoric and all in and loved it and didn't care about my body. I'm not exercise. I exercise all the time. I don't care. It doesn't matter. But then that wore off.
Right.
And the transformation, then I'm still working on it. It's been hard I swear to God. It's been hard ever since. I'm like, what about me?
Right.
So I'm hearing motherhood transition may be harder than the pain of actually squeezing it out. Well, maybe
Oh,
not.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
That pain's
Oh, man.
over and you forget. You do forget.
Yeah, that was when we left the birthing center. They were like, we'll see you in a couple years. And Sarah was like, no, you won't. A couple years later, they're like, told you so. But so this struck me, as like we joke, there's the 4 women maybe who are watching this, hopefully more with a woman on as a guest. But for all the dudes out there who are dads or going to be dads, like, what do dads miss the most? Or like, what are the most common fuck-ups you see dads making as they make the transition into being dads, or in the way that they support the mom? Like, or you could give us top couple, because I'm sure it's
From
more than
dude to
one.
dad. How many mistakes on the train from dude to dad?
Like, what are the biggest, you've been at it for a long time, you've seen families and like the transition, and like where are the biggest places people miss the boat?
It's a great question.
I'm going to take notes now.
So, right? No, you guys are great. It's so individualized. It's so personalized. And I'd say that if I try to identify what I've seen where it's messy. It is a fucking shit show for all of us to become parents. So, like, let's just start with that. It's a shit show. It's messy. You're going to make all the mistakes, and you're not going to know it till it's too late, and you can't fix it. So forgiveness and grace is key. I'm in that right now as my kids transition out of the house. I'm like, oh, God. But what I'd say is parents going either extreme of, like, kind of what you were saying of, I can't do anything, I'm hands off. Like, don't embrace that. Instead, I've seen parents be like, I can't do anything, I feel useless. And even my husband was just like, oh my God. I feel like what's more important is to recognize, this is what I try to counsel my clients is, okay, postpartum, you're the mom, your entire job is that baby. You do nothing else but take care of that baby. The dads or the partners, your job is to take care of that mother. So you're like circling around the mother and just looking for her every need, right? So she's not doing the laundry, she's not cooking, she's not doing the dishes, she's not taking care of the other kids. You're doing all that, or you're facilitating it. Everybody else, the mother-in-law, the mother, the other friends, they come in and their job is the dishes and the laundry and the childcare, right? But your job is you're the protectors, right? So you're watching that mother and baby, and if she's saying, take this thing, I need to sleep, then you do that. But seeing that as a critical role versus, oh my gosh, I can't do anything, I can't feed this kid. But seeing as, no, I am the protector of these 2 humans, and I'm going to be on alert and aware and pay attention and take care of their every need so that she can do what she needs to do and isn't stressed more about these other things that are always her job, right? So if her job has always been the house and the kitchen and the laundry, figuring out, and that's what I tell people previous to birth, is like, start learning how she does laundry, right? Start learning, people write lists and charts, and so, because sometimes for mothers, it's hard to let go of that, right? Because I do that really well. It's how I find my sense of purpose in the house, and so I don't want you to fuck up my laundry. Right. So, okay, let me write that down so that I can let it go and release it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd say is the other extreme is the dads who, like, get in there too much and try to do too much so that the mother can't find her sense of, I can't think of the word right now, but that when you feel really good about what you're doing, right? Because she's struggling, and again, it's messy, but she's struggling to find how she does this. And if you're always saving her, rescuing her, it's kind of like pain medicine in labor. Mm. If you're being rescued all the time, right. Which thank God there is pain medicine in labor because there's a time and a place for it, but you can't rescue a person from their transformation. I mean, you can, and that's what's been happening the last 100 years, right? We rescue women from their transformation experience.
And then they don't get it.
And then nobody gets it. And then we're all fucked up. Yeah. Right?
And we don't know why.
And then we send the children away at 6 weeks to daycare. And I mean, it's a whole thing, right? Which there's a lot of problems. I'm not saying if you've put your kid in daycare, you're bad. I'm just saying there's a lot of problems in our culture that have created the disconnect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
And the lack of empowerment. So circling that mother and helping her to become, assured of herself and clear in her skills of being that mother versus rescuing her. So does that make sense? Those two extremes, I think, is where I see people.
It's quite a balance to figure out.
It's messy.
Yeah. That's
By the time you're done, you'll have it dialed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all over and I got it figured out.
Yeah.
Which is why the grandparent thing is key.
Yeah.
It's key.
Well, and then grandparents don't necessarily. Honestly, am I going to get in trouble for this?
No.
Probably. Fuck it.
You can edit.
I feel like from the grandparents, I experienced those two extremes. Like,
Too much, too little.
mother-in-law too much, my mother absolutely nothing, right? Like, it was kind of like, oh shit, there's no guidance for this. They didn't experience
It's
that.
broken.
Right? They didn't experience that. So it's obvious that's going to happen.
It's been broken for a long time.
You mentioned pain meds for in labor, and one of the questions I was interested in was, okay, let's say it's a primitive situation, right? It's for whatever reason you're in like a non-modern survival situation. I'll say primitive situation, right? So you'd have time.
I mean, there could be a natural disaster.
Yeah,
You know,
but I'm more thinking,
you have a
okay.
hurricane and you're stuck here.
Well, I'm thinking, yeah, and so I'm
Versus
thinking
on purpose.
you have you have time, right? It's not like, oh shit, I got to go hunt because we need calories. Which is like, okay, you got your calories. What are the things that you would have it's primitive. What are the things that you think about, like, okay, there's a birth coming. Are there plants that you would want to have to administer? Are there, like, is it just like hot water and towels like you used to see on TV back in the day?
That's
I mean,
funny.
what are the things that you would have if you didn't have anything modern, fully primitive? What would you?
Yeah.
Is there anything, or is it just kind of like cross the fingers and do what you can?
No, it's a great question. And I'm working up some workshops and trainings to teach more about that. The first thing to understand is that for a low-risk pregnancy, 99% of the time, everything's going to be just fine, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
That's why free birth is taken off, right? Because guess what? It works. Birth
That's
works.
why humans are here,
With-
hundreds of thousands of years later.
Thank you, right? But that's low risk, right? The high risk ones, you might not make it, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, women are having babies way later.
Which is not a problem. There's a study about to be released. I just met with the woman who wrote the study based on thousands of statistics. And what they're showing is that advanced maternal age, which is over 35,
Yeah.
women who are older and women who are larger size have better statistics
Wow.
out of hospital.
Wow.
Not
Rather than in hospital, you mean?
worse statistics in the hospital because they interfere with it, right? They mess with it because they're scared because, oh my God, you're old, right?
Right.
I had my last child at 40. I attend a lot of women at 40. If they're low risk and we don't mess with them, they're fine.
Low
It
stress.
might take a little longer. Yeah. But back to your question, I think my biggest thing that you need, and yes, you need a clean space, not sterile. You need a clean space. You do need something to catch the amniotic fluid, the blood, So those towels or, sphagnum moss, fibers, whatever you've got. You can never go wrong with clean, warm water, like just for everything, from cleaning to just comfort. Anti-hemorrhagics, something that stops the bleeding, right? Through history, that is where we lose most women, is bleeding to death. So yarrow.
Some massive wad of yarrow ready to poultice.
No, you want to tincture it.
Okay.
You want to take it internally. Because what you have, generally what causes hemorrhage, what women can die in a matter of minutes, is that uterus isn't clamping down. It's like I get a cut, I put compression on it, it stops bleeding. The uterus has a wound this big, the size of the placenta, on
Right.
the inside. And if that uterus stays this side, it's just bleeding out. You can't clamp it down. I mean, you can. The way to do it is you put one hand in and one hand out, and you clamp it between your two hands.
Holy
which is
shit.
incredibly painful.
Yeah.
Incredibly painful and invasive, and you can cause infection. So you don't want to do
There
that.
was a whole line of jokes that just popped into my head right there, but I'm not telling.
Yeah, definitely not.
Well, we just lost all the women viewers with that.
The
Anyway.
jokes and the humor are so important. We can't take ourselves too seriously either.
Yeah.
But the yarrow and the shepherd's purse and angelica helps release that placenta if it's not coming out. But those are the herbs you want to have because those go in the body And those, they work differently in different physiological ways, but they cause that uterus to clamp down, to compress itself, to stop the bleeding. So yeah, those anti-hemorrhagic herbs, I think, are the number one thing that I would have, other than a clean place, warm water.
It's kind of the thing that blows my mind about childbirth, because in our society it's been so clinicalized, medicalized, you know, turned over to this specialized kind of field. I remember a girlfriend in high school, the family she lived with, the mother was a midwife, and she was a really fantastic artist. And I remember coming into the back room, and she had this painting of this woman like in a wetland, just squatting, giving birth.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, 17, 18-year-old dude, like, holy shit, that's fucked up. I can't believe you should go. That's bullshit. Literally that thought.
Good exposure for him.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure she was cool. But yeah, just thinking like, I don't know about that. And then she saw me looking at it one day, and she's like, what do you think? And I was like, you know, made a joke. And then I was like, you know, it just doesn't seem realistic to me. And she's like, well, how the hell do you think this happened for umpteen thousands of years?
Totally realistic.
And I was like, I don't know.
Well, and honestly, I mean, gosh, I have so much I want to say, but, you know, honestly, after watching women give birth for 20 years, I truly believe birth is supposed to be, like, you've watched your goats and pigs and chickens give birth, but are mammals, right? It should take about 2 hours. First one always takes longer. But in general, I've seen a lot of women give birth in a couple of hours with relative low amount of pain. And I think that is what is normal for humans. When we medicalize birth, when we made it into a scary thing, and we're given fear, we're being taught fear about birth from the day we're born.
We stressed it up.
Yeah. And so that's what takes us so long, right? And the reason my first birth took me so long, because up here, I'm like, I got to prove myself. You know, in my 36th, 40th hour, I remember, because I was delirious, right? I remember being like, there's a man in my stomach making me hurt, and I just have to outlast him. Fucked up, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what my society had taught me, right? You're a woman, you're weak, so fucking pony up, right? After my birth, when I was journaling, I was like, oh my God, I got some serious work to do, which I did. You know, took me 4 years. And I'm getting off topic a little bit, but just to finish that story, 4 years later, I had my second, and I was overdue because I was terrified. I was like, I don't want to ever.
Not ready for that 46 hours
I'm
again.
not.
Holy shit.
And the day I just gotten home, I was sitting in my car, the baby's asleep in the car seat, and I was sitting there going, I can't do this. And I was like, okay, you know what? What's the worst thing going to happen? I mean, other than death. I'm like, C-section. My worst fear is C-section. So I was like, all right, let's face that. What if I choose a C-section? And I felt this sense of relief where I was like, you know what? I already proved myself. I have nothing to prove, and I never want to do that again. So if it hurts that bad and it goes that long, I'm going to fucking walk myself into that hospital room and sign the paper. And I was like, okay. And then I went into labor, and I had a 6-hour painless labor. So it's mental, it's cognitive. So helping women, people giving birth, in that space, in that preparation. So most of what I do isn't medical. It's about helping people shore themselves up and prepare themselves for that surrender, right? To do what they have to do, to go through that. And then I'm there if something goes wrong. And sometimes it does. You know, sometimes it does. Having something sterile to cut the cord is also important. So, you know, put your knife in the fire, put it in boiling water, whatever.
I broke the flake at the time.
Because
it was in the stone.
I've had people burn the cord. So there's lots of ways to do that that's sterile and safe, but you don't want to introduce infection to the baby. That's really important.
Yeah, I was about to ask this stupid question about, like, could you do a C-section? And then I'm like, oh, well, what's it called? C-section, cesarean. So how many thousands of years was that first done?
The first time it was successfully done, which means everybody lived, I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was the late 1800s, and it was a pig farmer whose wife, the baby was stuck. I can't remember the exact story. The baby was stuck, and he just was like, well, I'll try to save the baby. Because back in those days, they just tried to save the baby. The mom would always die. So he did what he knew from his animal husbandry, and they both lived.
No shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was a long time before it was highly successful.
Right.
Well, I could imagine it did it happen? Maybe it didn't happen. Maybe people would never be like, cut her open.
I'm sure it happened, but I
got to figure it
but the
happened at
mom
least a
would have
couple
died,
times.
Probably most of the
Most
time.
likely. Most likely.
Yeah.
Definitely. There's a lot of messed up things about our medical system, but it's definitely a plus. It's definitely a plus of our medicine of our modern times is that some of that emergency in medical intervention. It's like,
it's brilliant.
How do you know, it's like, it could be pretty hard to replace that primitively.
Yeah.
You'll lose more people.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear some statistics?
Oh, shit. Here we go.
Yeah.
Number us.
So, as I got into it, I told you my story of how I started because of that deep sort of my calling, right? But as I got into it and I started to study it, I learned the statistics in our country. So we're in the United States. I'd be curious to know the statistics here on the island. But in our country, we are, of all the developed nations, we spend the most money on childbirth of all developed nations.
By far.
Okay. Second statistic is out of all the developed nations, we have the highest morbidity mortality.
Right.
We lose the most moms and babies.
Wow.
The most babies and moms are dead or injured in our childbirth, right? So we spend the most money, we hurt the most people, especially if you're black or a person of color. You and your baby have 2 to 4 times chance higher of dying.
Jesus.
Right? The third statistic, because people are like, well, why? Right? And so what's also important to know is that the World Health Organization has studied things like C-section, right? Which is a life-saving. We just talked about that. It's life-saving, right? If it's done 10 to 15% of the time at max. Okay? So most home birth midwives statistics are 2 to 5%. Like my C-section rate is 3%, right? I only do low risk, so that's a factor, of course. But across the board, any nation that's doing higher than 15% of a C-section rate is you're going to cause more harm. And we are nationally over 30% right now.
That's just nuts to me.
Right?
I mean, I've read a little bit about that, and it's like,
so we've taken a good
people
thing.
planning birth so that it doesn't interfere with their social schedule.
But
that's a very low
actually
percentage.
rare.
I'm
It's
sure
rare.
it is, but the fact that it happens once to me is too much.
The bigger problem is our litigation, right? So if you're a doctor in the hospital and anything is even slightly awry, if you don't do surgery, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Nobody ever gets sued for doing surgery.
They get sued for not doing surgery.
Yes.
Crazy.
So you just do it. And it's quicker, it's easier, you make more money. It's all the things. It's not just the elective cesareans.
Yeah, I gotcha.
And honestly, some people elect it because they have trauma.
Yeah.
There's reasons that it's great to have it as an elective, but it's a much bigger problem than people understand. And that's where midwifery comes in. And again, back to the developed nations, guess what all the other developed nations do?
Home birth?
No? Close? Yes, some, but
They have midwives?
yeah, exactly, Brad. So we hire trained surgeons for normal low-risk birth. And then we wonder why we have surgery?
Right.
Yeah,
Right?
they're excited to cut you open.
Well,
Or that they're trained to cut you
thank you.
open.
Yeah.
It's what they see, right? Their brains are trained, their neural bonds are trained to see something going wrong. The medical model is trained to see, watch for anything going wrong. The midwifery model, we have inversed that. We train in normal physiological birth. We see it over and over and over again. So when something's not normal, it stands out. And we transfer,
Right.
right? Versus being trained, it's like if I say red, 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 what do you guys see?
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm trained to look for things to go wrong, I'm going to find something to go wrong. I'm going to do surgery so I don't get sued. It's going to be quicker. I'm going to make more money. It's a snowball effect. But all the developed nations that use midwives first for low risk, and then when you risk out, you go to OB.
Right.
That's why they have such great numbers and
Right.
low cost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Be interested to see what the less developed nations statistics are. Just as a person who's interested in,
yeah. All
doing
this-
more
I
with
can-
less.
My students, I teach at college, a midwifery college, all my students write papers on those studies, so I can send them your way if you'd like to read them. It's incredible. The thing is, it's studied, it's published, it's obvious, it's simple, and nobody knows these things. And I'm
Right.
like, because there's so much money in the medical system, people are always going to have births.
Right.
So you're going to never run out of a money.
Pretty crazy how much it costs. I mean,
Yeah.
it was cheap for us. Eileen's birth was $500.
Oh, that's awesome.
and then Leo's was $1,000, and that's
It's
well. If you include the prenatal, I think Eileen's was like $700 and Leo's was like $1,200.
yeah.
And
Those are island rates.
that's
You know, nationally.
that's neighbor's discount.
Yeah, nationally we're between 35 and 5,000,
Yeah.
but that's for like everything, prenatal to postpartum.
I think most of my friends that
Yeah.
I'd talked to was like 10 grand, roughly.
For hospital.
Yeah, hospital.
We live
That's
in
low.
the socialist republic of Vermont, so we literally paid $0 for
Boom.
either birth.
Yes!
Yeah,
You motherfucker.
and we had midwives.
That's awesome.
But
I'm so
that's
glad
like,
you had that.
yeah, it's rare, and like honestly, the midwives were important, but the nurses at the birthing center, like, I mean, one of the things when you were talking about like what to have around in a primitive setting, I was like, how about a woman who's been at hundreds of births? Like, probably more important than anything else you could have, because like all of the women who supported Sarah, you know, with just like, oh, this is how I swaddle. This is how, you know, let's help you with the latch. Like, there's so many like things to learn about going into labor, having the baby, what to do for the next few days, and like that care, that net of care, like. It was like birthing summer camp. Like, Sarah didn't want to leave the birthing center because she was like, I have all this support. Like, at a moment's notice, I can have like 3 helpful opinions of people who have been doing this a lot. That like, it was really hard to leave, to just be like, all right, I'm just relying on this fucking guy. Like,
So what's interesting, Brad, is that is what we always had. Right? That's what we always had.
right. The
Every
aunts and uncle,
community
or the aunts and
of humans.
grandmothers, and yeah.
You had to
Everybody
back
did.
up after the uncle right
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he was just fucking watching TV over there.
Yeah. Yeah, you need the community,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, well, in Vermont's the kind of place too. There's like meal trains a lot, where like
Good.
the community comes together and like brings you lots of food, and yeah, but it's still, even like, it feels weak. Like, I know, you know, bringing food to friends who've had kids, and you're just like, I want to do much, much more, because I know what it's like, you know, being like, is there any chores I can do? Like, do you need me to feed your chickens? Like, what can I do for your family just to take something off the plate?
And could you say yes?
Well, that was the
did
thing,
they?
is like, some of them don't.
Oh.
And you have to be like, dude,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I will help. Like, I don't care. I'll
It's
drive
hard
over
to
here
say
and
yes.
help you. Yeah, exactly.
culturally,
no,
we're-
we got it. Yeah. it's like-
Self-made.
yeah.
I mean, I that's one of my, Dave and I both are really bad at that. You know, we feel like we've been taught deeply that you take care of your shit and you
Right.
don't accept help. It's a sign of weakness. And as we get older, we're getting better at asking.
Like, can you help me
Even
with
each
this?
other, you know, even each other. You know, I raised 3 kids on a mountain, pretty much alone, isolated, 1,000,000 acres of national forest, hauling water, washing my diapers by hand, you know, not by hand, I had a wringer washer, but hauling the water, heating the water, growing all our food, you know, and he was at work 12 hours a day, providing, you know, and doing his best to take care of us, and I was doing my best, and, you know, it's 20 years later, I'm like, you should have been home helping me. I'm exhausted now. I ruined myself. And he's like, you never ask. And I'm like, oh, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
big stuff that we realize are trained by our culture that didn't help us at all.
Well, he should have known.
And I should have known that,
Yeah.
you know?
Such
Boy.
a crazy thing, you know, when you study and put so much time into survival skills and then realize at a certain point that it's taught from this perspective of like the lone survivalist, like we were talking about on that one episode. Like,
Yeah.
we're taught that because that's an idea that was passed down to us for so many generations. And so obviously it has to apply to survival too, right? But it's
Right.
just modern ways superimposed on how it really was, which was like people. I mean, that was my biggest takeaway from that TV show, was like, oh, this doesn't hold real value. I mean, yes, it holds value in that you got to survive through the shitty situation if you're alone. Yeah, there's value in being able to survive until you get back to people. But that's the thing that really hit me every fucking day, was like, what would you do in a survival situation? Find people.
Yeah.
Like, what would you really do? Find people.
Or even a monkey.
Like, when would it end? Find people.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
Yeah.
find people, right? That's what we do. We
Yeah.
don't do the I'm just going to do this on my own thing, but we usually take it in that way. If it's not taught that way, we still take it in that way because we're so used to that mindset of the self-made person, or you do it on
Right.
your own, and that's what survival means, is you do it, right? You take care of it, when it's like you can be more than just yourself, right? It can be your whole group.
Right. People at survival classes are always asking, like, what should I bring into the woods with me? I'm always like, a buddy. Like, even if you don't talk to them.
I love that.
Like,
Yeah.
your most problems are much better if there's two of you.
Yeah.
You break your ankle, like,
Yeah.
you need someone else. Like,
Dude, even if I just had somebody to talk to,
right. Well,
even
that's
if they couldn't do shit, and I could be like, God damn, it sucked today.
Right.
And actually have them be like, oh, it sucks, I'm sorry to hear that, instead of like,
Right. Well, we all think we're going to be, like, cold and steely and conquer everything with our indomitable self-will.
my super dude broness.
Exactly.
All our skills. Well, our mentor, I mean, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm thinking about, Tom was our mentor, and he spent most of his time alone. When he was
Perpetuated
little, most of the stories about him young with Rick and grandfather.
Right.
But
Most of the time
more
was
of
just
the
him.
time he did time alone. I
No
guess
wonder
John
he's
was
so
on the
fucked
scene.
up.
Oh, it's funny. Yeah.
But no, there is that myth of, like, you should be able to do it by yourself, or, like, needing other people is a weakness. And it's just not even remotely true. Like, it's the bigger weakness is, like, you are incapable of communicating and working with others. That's, like, a much bigger weakness to deal with if you want to have, like, joy in life and
Success.
Yeah.
Yeah, and more than just happiness, like success. You can't be successful at it long term.
Right.
Like I can't think of a case. Maybe, but who knows? Because that person was by themselves and nobody fucking
Nobody
knows.
cared either.
That's it. Doesn't matter. It's like erased from the history books. Not even part of history anymore.
Well, so that must be a part of your work, I guess, is, like, really helping new families and moms to like learn to communicate, to ask for help, to, like, communicate about things that are uncomfortable to communicate about. Like,
That's my job, is talk about all the uncomfortable things.
Right.
Yeah, all the things you're not supposed to talk about, right? I get to talk about with people.
right.
Took me a while to learn to do that,
Body
this
parts.
Conversation with this
Death.
student.
Sexuality, fears, death. Like,
Yeah.
you got to talk about death because your baby could die. You ready for that?
Right.
Because let's talk about that. Because I don't want to have it happen and have us not talked about it.
Right.
And, you face your worst fears. So, again, I try to facilitate people facing their worst fears, and then it doesn't happen. It's like taking the umbrella,
Right. Yeah. Then it won't rain. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I think is important to just throw out here is the normal physiology of birth and what happens. Again, back to our fear-based culture, right? Is that, and this ties into how, my first one was so long and hard because I was trying to man it, and my second one was so easy. Is that
We're cool too, though. I swear.
absolutely. Why did I spend 10 years in the woods with you guys? We had a lot of fun, right?
We just can't make babies.
Well, you can.
We just don't know what the fuck we're doing with it, okay? I mean, we can make them, but that's about
That's
it.
what I mean. That's
Just
about
that
it.
first part.
Yeah. But that the human body is a freaking miracle. I mean, just when you understand how babies get conceived, it's mind-blowing that it even happens.
Oh, can we talk about conception more? Totally sweet.
Of course.
That was the part we're good at.
Which is important.
Primitively. I didn't need anything. No tools. No props. Nothing.
Not even a
Just
knife?
me. Nothing. Not a thing. I'm taking my knife off for this one, baby. Stone versus steel. How about just my hand?
Oh, that's great. Actually, that comes in handy for labor, too.
Oh. Which, the stone, the steel, or the hands?
Hands.
Hands. Yeah.
No, but, when the female body goes into labor, the oxytocin is released, which is really, really strong, which encourages the contractions, and it's the love hormone. So oxytocin fills our body when we share food together, when we have sex, an orgasm, when we laugh, right? When we have good times. Like, we all know what that feeling is, right? Women get flooded with that when they are in labor, right? They also, their body releases another chemical as strong as morphine, right? So they get this love. They're literally, and if you see somebody who's completely safe and comfortable, like on a physiological level, I mean, you can even have an orgasm in labor, which is pretty cool. Rare, but cool. But they look drunk, right? Because they're drunk on literally, they're high on love, right? It's really cool. And they can go through labor without pain because their body's producing morphines that kill the pain. Versus if they're afraid, if they're scared, then their body releases endorphins and adrenaline, which erases that and increases the pain receptor, right? So if you think about birth today, you know, everything you see on the movies and the TV shows, your water breaks and run to the hospital, everybody's screaming and freaking out. You show up in the hospital, bright lights, doctor comes in you've never met, shoves his hand inside you, right? What is your body doing? It's releasing all the endorphins, all the fight or flight, close, right? That cervix isn't opening, it's closing. And your experience is horrific. And you're like, please give me the drugs now.
Right.
And just cut this thing out of me, right? That is what birth looks like today, because we don't teach people, both men and women, what needs to happen for this to occur in a physiological way. You think about your cats or your dogs when they give birth, right? Are they under your spotlight with everybody sitting around watching them while you stick your fingers in their vaginas?
Yeah.
Right. They're hiding in the closet when you're
go to
asleep.
A dark place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what women need. They need the lights low because you don't give birth from here. Okay, that's what I tried to do the first time. Your cognitive brain. It's from your animal brain. Right? You have to feel safe, not here. Like, I feel safe in the hospital, thinks my brain. When my body, my animal self, is thinking, I feel safe when all you fuckers are out of my way.
Right.
And it's the middle of the night, and my kids are in bed, so don't worry about them. Right? That's what needs to happen. So, teaching the whole group of whoever's going to be there, like, you know her better than I do. So, you know what makes her feel safe and loved and comfortable and sexy and what makes her orgasm, right? That's what she needs. And I don't mean necessarily the stimulation, but the lighting, the people, the music, right? What is it that makes her feel so incredibly safe? And when people talk to me, clients are like, well, who should I have in my birth? And I'm like, well, you're going to be the most vulnerable that you'll ever be in your life. So who do you want to do that in front of? And I can talk to you about it being like who you feel comfortable being naked in front of, but it's much, much more than that, because it's not your body being naked, which it is as well. It is your soul. Your soul is going to be wide open, and you are going to be transforming. You are dying and rebirthing. And who do you want to witness that, right? This is not a spectator sport.
Right.
Who do you want to hold space and witness you, right? And that trusts you and believes in you no matter what. That's who you want in your space. And when people have the right people there, it works beautifully, because they are in that place of just oxytocin and hormones that stop the pain, and they don't have that adrenaline. And it's amazing. And again, I fail half the time, because in our society it's hard to make that happen, but I try to facilitate that for people, because I want everybody to have that euphoric experience giving birth.
It's crazy to, in this woke-ass world we got, it's hard to talk about traditional gender roles sometimes. And when you were talking about that adrenaline, oxytocin shift, I thought about hunting. And I've always, so like as a man, like I'll never be able to give birth. I'll never be able to experience what that's like to carry a life, to bring it into the world, and to be wholly responsible for its survival. Like I just will never have that. It's just not going to be part of like my reality. And so then I'm thinking like, well, what do I get as a man to be in that space? And I to me, I come back to hunting, and like. I think it's a part of that tends to be missing from our like modern the culture of hunting, which is like that ties into the oxytocin part, which is like the miracle of like that life that you just took. So as a man, I don't get to bring life, but I get to take it, and it's kind of like can sound like macabre or like kind of backwards, but
it's not. It's transforming. You're
exactly.
Transforming that gift of that life.
Exactly. And so it's like I get that adrenaline when I'm like, I've got to get it, right?
Doing.
Like, oh, come on, I need it. Now's the time. Like, boom, 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 boom. Okay, take the shot. And then like it goes well, and then the flood of oxytocin comes. Like, oh, we're gonna live,
'Cause you're-
right? Like, oh, you
You're
know,
protecting and providing, which
But-
is
and-
your job. I
and
don't
it's
get
like
to do that.
well, yeah, I mean,
In the same way, you know, I don't have the build, I don't have the strength, I don't have the, you know.
yeah, running down and chasing a goat and grabbing it, it's like, it's usually me, you know? I'd hate to say it's usually like the guys in the group, usually, they're just a little bit faster, just a little bit stronger, like, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that when you think about it, like juxtaposed against giving birth, like, it's got more meaning than just, it's dead now, so let's just take it home and cut it up, right? It's like there's a whole connected to the earth, connected to my community, and connected to the divine, right? Connected to the spiritual that can be part of it. So easy to see in giving birth. Like, you experience that, you see that, especially in a natural setting, and it's like, oh, I understand life now.
Well, I mean, it makes me think of, like, when I'm talking to people about hunting, one of the things I reference is body drugs, and when you were talking about giving birth, that's what I thought, is like, your body has, like, potent drugs in it that it releases when it knows they're needed, and that, like, I warn people, like, be ready for the biggest shot of adrenaline you've probably ever felt, unless you've been in a life or death situation. Like, when you're about to take that shot, it's kind of a problem, because you're like, all of a sudden you're like, your body's readying you to jump on the thing and bite it to death, you know.
Yeah.
And then be prepared to feel good when it's dead. And, like, that is hard for people in our culture, because death and violence are only ever like a negativism if you're not a hunter, you know. And that, like, this is where violence is supposed to fit, is like, you have to physically destroy a body in order to feed your family, you know. And that it's a weird position to be like, I feel better than I've ever felt, and this thing is dead. Like, I feel bad about its death, but also, like, my body is saying, like, good fucking job.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting position.
Well, I think it's super interesting when you think about how it's, like, usually taken in, because, like, a lot of times people don't let themselves feel bad.
Right.
And I think that's an important part about it too, right?
Tom taught us that, and I'm so grateful to Tom and John.
Yeah.
You know, the gratitude piece, the understanding the whole circle, and the ceremony piece, right? That we can integrate that experience of both the I feel bad and I feel great through however we relate to the ceremony piece, but that we honor, we give gratitude, we recognize, whether even if it's just mentally or you do a formal type of ceremony of the death, that is bringing life. And that circle of life that, I mean, people that, yes, speak to me about, you know, killing animals, and I'm like, but how is that any different than killing that wood sorrel, right? Like, life is life. So stop having a priority of, like, oh, that deer is more important than that wood sorrel. Like, be honoring and have gratitude for everything that gives its life so that we can live, which is every moment. You know, every step I take, I'm killing something.
Right.
So, like, if you come from that place, I still practice, I work on my practice of recognition of that. Does that make sense? And that's helped me with that.
Yeah, when just made me think of what you're talking about, how, like, in birth you go through a death, like, instead of, like, only seeing that death with fear, that, like, person you were before birth, like, you can celebrate it and grieve for it and then let it go.
Yes.
In the way that, like, you do that with the deer that you shot, when you see the light go out of its eyes, and you're, like, inhabiting both things at once, like the grief and the joy.
Absolutely. And back to your first question about, you know, how did you transition to become, you know, like, watching Sarah become a mother was almost harder than the birth.
Right.
And it is about, you know, that transformation is very important to recognize, oh, I have to let this die.
Right.
Else you're stuck.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like the part that makes it harder, where we're talking about, like, for the mother, it's just instant, and you get this flood of hormones that kind of helps push you in that direction. It's like, at least from what I see, it seems pretty automatic, but, like, as a father, it's like a harder transition. For what's for me, for sure, like, oh, I got to learn to let that dude go. Right? Like, that dude's not serving, and it's like, you know, I had to fuck up a bunch of times to be like, oh, okay, all right.
Let
me just let that dude go.
Inappropriate.
Go for it. Come on. Lay it on us.
No.
No.
You had to fuck up instead of fucking down?
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking about Well, I was going to make a joke, and it's not a joke. Like, we wouldn't be here, I don't think, if we didn't have that. Every time we nurse our babies, we get that flood of oxytocin because we would kill them.
Fuck yeah, we would. Are you kidding me?
We would kill the babies.
Are you kidding me? We totally would.
If we weren't falling
So
in love
many
with them
times I
over
shake the
and
shit out of
over.
that thing. Ah, but it's so cute.
But you don't get the hormones. We do.
Right. The
Over
dad
and
has
over
to
and over and over
develop
again.
the relationship
Yeah,
slowly.
exactly.
So I'm thinking of the other ways you can give yourself oxytocin every time you need to do that.
All right, I'm glad you
Just saying.
told that joke in that way. But I'm glad you told the joke because
You tried it.
What the heck?
Do a study. Let me know how it works.
Well, on the
Hold on, dude, it'll be done in a
472nd
minute.
time. What is Pornhub.com? And why do you owe them $400,000? This is part of my scientific study. There probably is a Pornhub out there. Sorry, I just got them 500, 200 clicks.
Oh, that's funny. But I found as I've been thinking about what skills do I use, I think Sarah asked me the other day, what skills do you find yourself using in today's profession, right? And the tracking and the awareness, I think, are the cornerstones. So I just want to plug that stuff. Like, go to your sit area, practice your sensory awareness, because that, builds that harmonic of that intuition. And I can't tell you the times that I've truly... I feel like I'm channeling Tom when I say this. It wasn't me. Thank grandfather. Like, it wasn't me. I was the channel. The times that I have saved lives were those intuitive. Like, I knew it in my body. I didn't have any other physical way of knowing things. I knew, and I acted, and I felt that it was so. It hasn't happened a lot, but every time it's happened, it's been so humbling because. Like, you just know that wasn't me. I was used as a vessel. And I truly believe it's because of, 3 decades of going to my sit spot and practicing awareness and then tracking, right? Like, physically tracking, tracks, prints in the ground, but training our brains to always be putting the pieces together, tracking physically, tracking spiritually, tracking emotionally, and that's what I do with my clients, right? I'm tracking them through the pregnancy, I'm tracking them through their labor, I'm paying attention, I'm putting the pieces together. And I'm not just in that linear cognitive thinking brain, I'm using my whole being to take in everything I can take in, right? And tracking that so that I know what to do. And it's scary as shit, right? It's the pucker factor, because I don't know what's gonna happen and I'm not in control. And people might die and I'm gonna have to deal with that. And that's terrifying. But the flip side is mostly they don't, and we get to build a better world. And so that's great. But it's been really cool to be able to bring in those skills, from the time that we were in the woods.
Was it us? Did you view them separately, or did you view it originally that the midwifery part is like, oh, this is an extension of the primitive skills?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good question. I mean, when I started... in my head, I was like, this is the most obvious thing I would do next. Of course this is what I'm doing, but I couldn't articulate it. I'm still trying to articulate, well, how does that make sense to anybody else? Like, how do I say that out loud? For me and my development, and because I'd already sort of done the thing, you can never stop practicing skills, but, I'd done all the things that I wanted to do and pushing myself and knowing I could do it. And I sort of just hit a dead end with, like, that's not my calling. It's not my calling to be a better flint napper. I'm a terrible flint napper, but I was like, I love it. It's great, but I'm here to do something else. It's not my purpose for the planet. And so when I felt like I hit that ceiling and I became a mother, I was like, oh, well, this is obviously what I'm next supposed to do, because I was ready because of all the hard things I'd already done, right? To face something even harder, even scarier. The great unknown of life and death and transformation and facilitating somebody through something epically messy and meaningful and important, and yet there's no guidebook. I got to figure it out. It was really interesting, but again, now that I'm trying to put it into words and recognizing, those skills of tracking and awareness more than anything else, and knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt, because we lived in the woods, right? Like, we don't need anything more than what we already have. Like, we were born, this is our birthright, we have what we need, trust that. You know, so I feel like I also got that from our time practicing skills, is that knowledge of you don't need all the shit.
Right. Yeah, watch the baby. That's like been a big lesson for me. And like all the things everyone tells you about raising kids, and it's like most of it for me comes down to like make observations about what they need. Like they're telling you. They're not using words, but they're telling you like what do I need, and then like test and like do, you know, just like make an action and see how it goes, and then like observe the results and like repeat, and that's like the process of learning skills.
Just like breaking rock, right?
Exactly. And if you're doing it, if you're not conscientious about what you're doing and you're not paying attention, you're just gonna end up with rubble. And I feel that way about being a dad. Like if I pay attention and I like really make sure that I'm asking like what is the kid telling me, then
Sacred question.
yeah, then I do pretty well.
And how much therapy bills to clean up that debitage pile later on.
Right.
Like, is that the rubble pile? Oh, man. Pay the therapist for that.
The other thing that makes me think about what you were just talking about is like, I always tell Scout students, I'm like, if you're not a parent and you're going to be, like, these skills will come in handy, like low sleep, not a problem. Navigating in the dark quietly, not a problem. Like, doing things you don't want to do when they need to be done, not a problem. Purpose beyond self, you got that too. Like, communication under stress, like, there's all the skill sets of the Scout. So, like, you can sneak through your baby's room and
Why did
change
he leave
the
the
diaper
class?
and
Oh.
escape without being noticed. Like,
I love that, Brad. Yeah, I'm just thinking about all the
sneak out of the
times.
house.
Right, you got them asleep and you're like, can I get out of the room before they wake up? Damn!
Exactly.
I thought you were talking about the garrote part. Look at the little bastard! Would you stop screaming? I'm just kidding. I'm just joking about that. Oh, wow. Well, what an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah. Anything we missed? Anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get
My
to?
cheat sheet here. I think we hit all the important points. I mean, you know, this is our birthright, and doing it again, I just want to repeat that. Like, if we are pissed at what we didn't get, right, then recognize this is your chance to do it for the next generation.
I find myself pissed that I'm giving it. I'm like, you little bastards! I didn't have this! So I'm not going to give you that. All right, fine. You get it and I don't.
Yep. Become the ancestor that you wish you had. We're all becoming ancestors. So I think about that too. You know, I don't have my ancestral lineage intact. So instead of being pissed about it, I can put that energy towards, you know, what ceremony do I wish I had? Let me create it. You know, and I've created ceremony for my children from birth to rite of competence, rite of passage, you know, all the things. So I think creating what we need, recognizing we have the opportunity to make, reclaim our birthright. And that, again, back to, you know, that asshole,
God,
right? Everything he taught me in my 20s, I didn't really get. I mean, I did. I thought I did. But now that I'm 50, I'm like, oh.
Right.
Shit, that
That's
motherfucker was kind of okay, right? Shit.
So yeah, it feels good to be back talking with you guys and sharing our stories and recognizing our paths and how important this work is and how we can positively impact the future from our own kids to the people we're working with by calling it out. You know, like, let's say what it is, whether it's hard or good, or like talk about the hard stuff.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Really awesome. Really psyched we got to do this.
Thanks for
too.
having me.
Slapping your hand. All right, fine, brother. Woo! We're still
All right.
bros.
Till next time.
Thanks, everybody. Like and subscribe. Click the buttons that we don't have up.